Going once, you're on.
Welcome to Ecologic for the month of December, and we coming on early, kind of mid-month, because our normal date is the fourth Sunday of each month, and that's Christmas Day. So we hope you are going to get informed about our main subject tonight with the help of Dave Dixon and Bob Hammock, both on the Dredge Vermilion. The subject is an update on the Tetra watershed and things that are happening to improve what happened in 016 floods, so hopefully it never happens again. Thank you all for being here. Dave?
Thank you, Harold.
This has been a long battle, and more we have the leaders in various parishes working very much with us to solve some of the problems. And it starts way up there in Alexandria. Boyce, above Alexandria, is where the watershed starts. Rapides and Avoyelles Parish and Evangeline Parish, and all that water historically would go right into the Chaffly of the Red River. And that has changed for lots of reasons, and which puts us very much at threat and causes a lot of heartache and devastation to the farm community, to homeowners. We lost thousands of cars in the 016 flood, and of course it brings the economy of the area to a complete standstill for a month to 6 weeks. The Dredge Vermilion and other volunteers across the whole region from Alexandria down have worked to resolve the issues and what are the problems and how they can be solved. So, Dave, you might share with us some of your thoughts on this and where are we going. And this is an important issue because flooding, the fact that we flooded 5,300 homes in Lafayette Parish has a big effect on insurance companies willing to actually write insurance for our area. And if they are writing it, they're doing it at a great expense. And that affects the people's ability to buy a home. It has a big impact on a lot of things. So hopefully we can turn this train around. We have the wetlands and natural retention areas that can solve this problem. And the issue is to improve the plumbing. We have the greater Chaffly River, which we could dump an unlimited amount of water into it. And it wouldn't, if you dump the entire flood of 016 into the Chaffly at Cross Springs, as we hope to do, it wouldn't have raised the water, rose an inch. The volume of the Chaffly is so enormous that the local flood would have no impact on its water levels.
So what we're going to cover tonight, Harold, is we're going to cover an update of projects that have they're either in progress, in design, some are completed, some are funded, and they haven't started the design, but they have funding, so there's a high probability they'll go forward. And we're going to touch on a couple of them that are high impact projects that haven't been funded yet or approved. We're going to talk about them and why they're so important. I just want to make a point here. We can't touch on every project that we're dealing with in the whole watershed. There's too many of them in the 1 hour show that we have here. So these are the ones that have an impact in the watershed. They're regional in nature. And so if we can get these done, we would significantly de-risk the situation here in our watershed. So with that, if we could go ahead and start the PowerPoint presentation and give everybody a little overview. Okay, I want to talk about when you're doing projects, sometimes there's unintended consequences, okay? And I want to start with this issue right here. Y'all may remember of hearing about the Great Flood of 1927, which was at the time the greatest natural disaster ever to impact the United States and still may be the greatest natural disaster that ever impacted the United States. I forget the number of states it impacted, but it was like a large number of states. Massive flood on the Mississippi River. So what happened was that our to-be president was appointed as a project manager, supervisor, or overseer of the Great Levee projects. That's Herbert Hoover. You may recognize the name Hoover Dam. I think he was the engineer on that project. Okay, so one of the projects the major projects they did after the flood of 27 is they federalized all the levee systems that were typically have been built by the states and local entities, and in some cases private farmers. They went in and they federalized these levees along the major rivers and such, and they also built floodways, including the floodways, the three of them that are in Louisiana, the Bonnie Carré, the Morganza, and the West Atchafalaya. Okay. Well, when they built the West Atchafalaya, they blocked Bayou Catawba, which we're going to show you a picture here in a minute where that's at. That's in the central part of our watershed, and it's drained past the Atchafalaya River. So keep in mind, in 35 they did that, 1935. 5 years later, they had a major flood at Surrey Street that was 7 feet higher than the 2016 flood. Can we pull the PowerPoint back up again?
Oh, is it at 2? Sorry.
I'll go back to the first slide, please.
Is this slide 2?
It should be the first slide. That's slide 2 right there.
There it is.
There we go. Okay, 1943, 3 years after this greatest flood ever recorded. 3 years later, we had another major flood. It wasn't as bad as 40, but it was very bad. It would have flooded a good portion of Lafayette, did flood a good portion of, especially where Lafayette's been developed. And in 47, 4 years after that one, they had a third one, okay? So evidently somebody, I'm sure they long dead, that made the decisions about blocking Bayou Catawba and its drain to the Atchafalaya River, realized that they made a big boo-boo. So they came in pretty quickly in the early 50s. We don't know the exact date. We tried to find that. And they dredged the Vermilion. Okay, that was the first thing they did. Then in 1957, they put some floodgates on the Henderson levee, the west side levee, for Bayou Catawba to let water go into Henderson Lake. And that worked until 2016, 69 years after, even with all the development, all the changes and the lack of maintenance, it prevented us from having another major flood. Even though we had some monumental rainfall events during those 69 years. So with that, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so let's talk about the watershed and how it drains. Okay, our watershed starts up in Alexandria, and there's really just a few main drain paths that are still active in our watershed. The Chatelaine Lake Canal and Bayou Buff and Bayou Catawba from Alexandria coming south. And then along the levee, the West Atchafalaya, the Henderson levee, the Bayou de Glaze and Bayou Amy bar pits, okay? They named them bayous or bayou diversion, but they're actually the borrow pits that they use to dug out to build the levee. The bottom line is all the water from that area up in the northern and central part of the watershed ends up in Bayou Catawba. And Bayou Catawba is a very big tributary in the central part of the watershed. It is right north of and right south of, and it actually exits and go right south of US 190, passes through Port Barry, starts up in Washington, Louisiana with the convergence of Bayou Buff and Bayou Cocodrie. The majority of the water, it appears, comes from the west side, based on the data that we were able to get, which is limited, okay? And when it reaches Bayou Catawba, there's 3 places it can go. If it can get into this floodway, the West Atchafalaya floodway, it can get into Lake Henderson and back into the Atchafalaya River downstream of Lake Henderson. It can go down Bayou Amy to Lake Falls Point into Bayou Teche. It can come right out of Bayou Catawba into Bayou Teche, and Bayou Teche is connected to the Vermilion River, okay? So, the problem we have here is that all Bayou Catawba is being overwhelmed, and all these major drains have issues. They all
Mainly
have,
have dams on
they
them.
have a dam on them, or they're plugged up and they need to be cleaned out. And they just can't handle the volume of water that we're experiencing in the watershed. So can we have the next slide, please? We're gonna start with the projects. In the square, I don't know why, it's in black and white here, but is it in color?
Yes, I'm covered.
It's in color, okay. Well, the red outline around Lake Cocodrie, Lake Cocodrie is a lake that was built in the northern part of the watershed that was built to attempt to be another Toledo
Toledo
Bend
Bend.
type asset. Didn't really work out. And it is as big as and has the same retention as our Cypress Island swamp right here north of Lafayette, okay? So what we're proposing to do, can we go to the next slide, please? Is this gate up in the top half of that block, that rectangle around the dam and the gate. That gate is being replaced by DOTD. If you notice to the right, there's US 167. And I believe after the two hurricanes we had in
19,
what was it?
2019, Laura
29
and Delta.
Laura and Delta.
Laura raised the lake, its pool stage is 52, it raised it to 62. It couldn't drain, so when Delta came behind, it raised it another 6 feet, which put Highway 167 4 feet underwater, and put Lee's Pie Place in LeCombe underwater. And main problem is the lake is so large, and the dam, the ability to drain it is inconsequential. So we desperately need to put a drain that would stop the flooding of 167 and a lot of homes and farms that went underwater
Okay.
at a very low cost.
Why is it important to,
It's important that we can establish retention
Exactly.
before there's a
Okay.
major storm.
that's why you
comes
want
up
to
here.
drain it, because you
That's
have a
right.
place for the water to go.
All right,
It's
yeah,
not
now
just
the gate
draining
they
from
have
far.
there now will not drain the lake, okay, it's
Right.
too small. Now, the problem we have here is that DOTD is envisioning before a storm comes up, they're gonna be able to open the new gate they're gonna put there, and they're gonna lower the lake. Well, I don't think that's gonna work, because it's gonna take time for that water to get out of the system, and it's gonna cause us problems down here. We've already raised that alarm about that. But what could be done is that instead of Lake Cocodrie becoming Lake Cocodrie, we could return it to its natural state, leave the dam there so it can hold the water back, and lower the lake and operate the lake at a much lower pool stage to reestablish that 100,000 acre feet of retention, same size as Cypress Island, north of us. So when they get a big rain up there, we're not gonna immediately be seeing it. Right now, the lake stays full. You can see where the dam is. You can see the water running over the dam in this picture right there. So immediately we see water down here. When they get a big rain down there, it comes over that dam and right down to the Bayou Catawba we talked about, and right down to Bayou Teche and right down to Vermilion River.
How many
Okay.
retention ponds is that one lake gonna be worth?
That would be worth all the retention ponds we'll ever build in the watershed.
You could get probably close to 100,000 surface acre feet of retention. And all the retention ponds in Lafayette Parish, if they are empty when the rain comes, which, by the way, they're never empty, would only make up about 3,000.
Right. So and that 100,000 acre number that Harold's referring to is based on, that's not our number, that's based on Wyeth and Fisheries, who did a study on this lake some years ago, and we got our hands on the study.
Okay.
So it is a large area that could tremendously help with, reducing the amount of water we see down here.
That
Let's go to-
amount is about 10% of the 016 flood. Had that in place, you probably would have lowered water in the whole system a foot or more. And that's an important number because 73% of the homes flooded in the system had less than a foot.
All right, next slide, please.
All right.
All right, this is a, you'll see at the top of the slide there, it says diversion channel. This is a Balls Parish project that's gonna eliminate, well, the water used to go around that big loop on the right side there. It's called the Big Bend area,
Yes.
by the Glaze, okay?
33-mile stretch. of-
This is water on the east side coming from Alexandria, coming down the Shetland Lake Canal, into Bayou de Glaze, and then exiting into the Atchafalaya River in the lower right-hand corner down there, right north of Simsport. Okay, well, that flow path is blocked right now. And 100% of that water right now is coming down here to meet us in the lower part of the watershed. Because there was a gate in the Big Bend that was damaged after the flood of '73. It's been abandoned and plugged, and they finally getting around to, let's fix this. And the way they're gonna do it, they're gonna fix it the right way. They're gonna do a diversion where they don't have to go all around Big Bend and bring the water to the Atchafalaya River. Okay, next slide, please. All right, well, this is a project we've been working on. We got funding to, oh, by the way, those last two projects are funded. Okay, so this project here, some of the engineering work is funded on it. So what we're proposing is to add a new gate right there between what they call Bayou Amy, which is the borrow pit, and Bayou Catawba, because sometimes the water's too high on the right side in the floodway to be able to utilize those gates. So when that's happening, all that water is coming down to the lower part of the watershed, not in the floodway, but on the protected side, which means a lot of it's coming down to Bayou Teche, and a lot of it's coming down to Vermilion, and a lot of it's going down Bayou Amy and Henderson. So anyway, we got engineering money on this one here. DOTD provided that money. We wrote the project up and submitted it and got it done. St. Landry Parish is a sponsor along with the RAB Levy Board. Next slide, please. So that one there hadn't started yet, but we do have some money to get started. Okay, this one here has been this one project that we proposed to remove a blockage in the floodway, which backs up water when they do open those gates on the Henderson levee, and they try to run the water down to Lake Henderson and eventually down to the Atchafalaya River. There's a pipeline canal that crosses the basin, and they didn't backfill the canal, and they left spall on both sides, and this was done in the early '60s, and now it's all plugged up. We got the money with CPRA. This is being sponsored by St. Landry and St. Martin parishes. And this project has been bid out. The bid's been awarded, 100% funded. They anticipate starting this thing. We wanted them to start it this year, but it looks like we're gonna get started now. It'll be early next year, as soon as they can get in there and get it done. So they're gonna open up them spall banks and let that water go on down to Henderson Lake, which is gonna help matters a lot. Okay, next slide, please. This is a project that's not funded. It's being proposed by us, and it's also being proposed by St. Landry and St. Martin, and we're gonna try to get all the other parishes on board. It's actually two projects here. Extend that Grimmett, which is the outfall for Bayou Catawba, that goes down to Lake Henderson, to bring that water east and west to disperse it better in the floodway, and to also reconnect Bayou Catawba to the river. So remember I said they blocked Bayou Catawba and the unintended consequences of blocking Bayou Catawba? Well, when they fixed that particular unintended consequence, they only put a gate on the west side, on the Henderson levee side. They did not put a gate on the river side. So it's still blocked. We want them to put a gate there and reconnect Bayou Catawba, that flow path, to the river. Let me tell you why. 2016, Harold, how high was the water in the river?
At 8. The river was at 8 and Henderson came well over 20. So we'd have had a 12, 14-foot head to drain
Right.
this whole flood.
We could have pushed almost all the water from North Louisiana,
Could have gone
north
through
to
that.
central Louisiana, went through, out into the river right there. It would have probably saved the big majority of the houses
Probably
that flooded in. the
95%
watershed.
of the homes would not have flooded had this been available.
It took all the pressure from the north part of the watershed off of us by having this in place. So the Corps of Engineers is just recently, I don't have it in here, but they are gonna resume a study. They have to do a study before they do anything major like this, okay? But they got funding for it. DOTD is gonna provide the local sponsor part of it. That was just recently we were made aware that is going to be moving forward. We've been asking them to resume that study for the last 4 years.
By the way, this project was proposed by the Corps when they put the rock weir across Wax Lake Outlet. They had 3 projects. One of it was to restore the connection with Catawba and the river across Springs. The second was to realign Crookshank, which they did, and then they put rocks across 6 Mile Lake, which was a horrible failure. But they never did do the Catawba Gate as was proposed in the 80s.
We're calling that the Bycatawba Eastern Floodgate. You can see it in the lower right-hand corner. It's just totally blocked right now. Next slide, please.
And by the way, this project would have an enormous impact on fisheries and water quality because it would not only let the flood water out, but when Henderson was suffering with bad water quality, low oxygen conditions, you could let water in from the Chowflower River, which is the best water in the whole system, and to flush it through and bring fisheries. The whole thing is to allow restoration of water quality and everything that lives with much better water quality. You know, the frogs, the bass, the sac-a-lait, the brim, you name it, would be much enhanced by that project. It's not just flood control, it's water quality and fisheries restoration.
All right. This is a gate that's south of the pontoon bridge along the Henderson levee that was put in the early 60s to build I-10. So they could close that gate, they could raise the water level enough to float barges in there to build I-10. It was built by DOTD. It was never intended to be a permanent fixture. They did not remove it, okay? It's still in operation today, barely. It barely functions, okay? It's greatly undersized.
For sure.
It causes the water to back up when we try to drain Henderson Lake, lower Henderson Lake when there's a
During
threat.
the flood of 016, this was closed and no one knew who had the key to open it.
Right. Turns out, St. Martin Parish operates this particular gate. St. Martin Parish is taking the lead to work with DOTD to get this project funded and to get this thing replaced. So we need to replace it.
And they want to include in that an ability of fish to migrate from the river into the Henderson system.
Right. So all these projects we're talking about inside the floodway is going to greatly enhance fisheries, sport fisheries, commercial fisheries, water quality issues, wildlife. All that's going to be enhanced by these projects, in addition to
Flood
the
control.
flood control, flood mitigation benefits of these projects. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, this is the infamous Spall Bank. Some news about this is that when St. Martin Parish objected about removing the Spall Bank, Lafayette Parish redesigned the elevation slightly to raise it from 9 feet to 10 feet, finished elevation, which provides no negative impact in a 100-year flood to the Cypress Island community. So it will benefit us by allowing water to migrate from the river over the Spall Bank into the lower part of the slide there, which is the lowest part of the swamp. the parish, we understand, did a drone survey during one of the floods last year, and they could see the collision of the water coming from the north, along with the water coming from town, from Lafayette proper, from the city proper, as they meet in the swamp when the river's flowing north in town, and the river from the northern part of the watershed is flowing south. They meet right there. The waters meet right there. And it was having a hard time getting into the swamp. So what it's gonna allow,
So that's
it's
two
gonna allow it easier,
Yep.
a flow path for that water to go to the southern part of the swamp.
We hope it'll minimize the days of backward flow and also minimize the days it takes to drain the swamp.
Right.
During the flood of 2016, it took almost over a month for it to drain. And because the drain is so small, the drain is only 5 feet deep and 60 feet wide.
Yeah.
And you try to take out 100,000 surface acre feet of water, which the math doesn't work, and it's why, you know, we really vulnerable. In fact, the Cypress Island floods, it takes forever to drain.
What does it do to the swamp when water sits in it for 30, 40, 60 days at a time?
It condemns it as a wetland.
Kills it.
It kills it as a wetland.
Kills the trees, kills the hardwood trees.
Kills
Yes.
the trees, yes. The
Yeah.
first trees to go are the hardwoods that produce the food for wood ducks and squirrels and deer and a lot of critters.
So the removal of spoil banks to allow the water to get out of Cypress Island Swamp is a benefit to Cypress Island Swamp. It's not a
Enormous
threat to it.
benefit, yes.
Well,
Okay,
then it reduces the amount of time the swamp is full of water. So if you get a follow-up storm coming in there when the swamp is full,
you have
you
retention
could,
area.
you could really have a serious problem.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
If your retention zone is full and a flood comes, you're in big trouble. So the quicker you can drain it, the better off you are, where you have two rain events that are a short time span apart. As
Another-
occurred in 2019.
Another important thing to remember about the Cypress Island spoil banks is those are not a naturally occurring phenomena. They were put there in the 1950s when we dredged the river the first time.
That's right.
So when we went in there under a whole lot of controversy and problems and this and that, everybody got all up in arms, and that's just how it happened. But we weren't monkeying with Mother Nature. We were trying to restore
the natural.
natural.
Good point, Bob.
Yeah.
Good point.
Lay
In
of
fact,
the land.
our objective is to utilize these swamps that God gave us, okay, overflow swamps, to mitigate and minimize our flooding, okay?
Right.
So let me tell you a little bit about the modeling on this project. When this project was first proposed, and the parish said, hey, this is a good idea, let's look at this. They had an engineering firm that they used, model it, and they estimated it would reduce the flood, the crest in a typical 100-year flood by a foot. Well, UL modeled it and said, yeah, it'll reduce the crest, and they estimated at 9/10 of a foot, if I remember right. And I ran my own estimate, and I come up with 1.2 feet, based on some work I did on it. So, I think it's gonna be a highly beneficial project in a 100-year flood.
At very low cost.
It'll be the most
Cost of
bang for the buck,
Yep.
the most
Right.
return on investment
Yes.
of any project we will do,
Right.
period. Okay, period. So again, utilizing our nature's 100,000 acre foot swamp retention zone that God put there, by making it work better, by removing the unintended consequence, again, another unintended consequence
Exactly.
of putting a spoil bank on the wrong side of the river. They'd have put it on the other side of the river, it
We
would have
would-
been much less impact.
That's right.
Because the low part of the swamp is on the south side.
That's right.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the St. Martin Parish project, 100% St. Martin Parish. It's called the Joe Day Canal. And Joe Day Canal kind of intersects the very east and south part of Cypress Island Swamp, okay? So it is some connectivity to the swamp. We're not exactly sure, because we don't have all the data about how much connectivity it does have to the main body of the swamp where the Cypress Island fall banks are. Okay, but we know there's some, okay? Because some of this coulees, the Cypress coulee, runs up there by Lake Martin. And this area right here does have some connectivity there. And a significant amount of water comes out of here when there's a flood. So me and one of my board members went down there, myself and one of my board members, during one of those floods, not this year, but last year. And we actually did some measurements about what was coming out of the Joe Day. This is before they touched it. This is before they done any work on it whatsoever. And it was flowing a very high volume of water into the Bayou Teche. So what they're doing in that thing, and what they're doing there, is they pulling and it was really nasty. It was full of trees, full of debris, silted up to the max, okay? And they are pulling all that out, and they're dredging the silt out. And this project, 100% funded by St. Martin Parish, and it is underway. I believe the clearing and snagging is done, and the dredging is in progress. They should be finishing this project early next year. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's gonna help move some of the water that would normally go into the swamp. Instead of coming out by the river, it's gonna come out through this connection right there. Okay, dredge Catahoula Lake. You might notice there's an island out there in the lake. Kind of look in the middle of the picture. I think there's an arrow. I can't see it on my monitor here, but there's an arrow pointing to an island. It is silted up so bad, it actually formed an island in the lake, okay? So St. Martin Parish, one of the 100% funded by them, they went out there and they surveyed the lake, which is one of the main flow paths in the watershed, of moving the water down to the southern part of the watershed on the east side. So they went out there and they hired a dredge boat, and they dammed or levied off some sugarcane land, and they dredged the Catahoula Lake. We're gonna show you a picture of the dredge here in just a second. We're having a little technical difficulty with the phone. All right, let me see here. You walked in front of the camera.
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't matter if it is. You can walk in front of it with,
Yeah, that's
on
what
the
I thought.
slideshow.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it doesn't matter right now, because and when, we can't go back live till Jake comes back.
Okay. Keep talking.
Well,
Keep
keep talking, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, this project, 100% funded by St. Martin Parish. And they actually, I was told by the president of the parish council that they actually did a little more work,
They don't move.
You don't have much
because I think
slack to play with
their cost wasn't running as high as they expected. So they did a little more work on actually dredging this lake here. So let's go to the next slide, David. Okay, this is a picture of the little dredge boat that they utilized. We went down there and watched it work. And we got the contact information of the owner of this. There's a company in Hammond, I believe, that owns this rig. And this thing is tiny. And the beauty of this thing is that it's a hydraulic dredge. So what does that mean? That means we don't have to go out there and load the spall on a barge. We can pump it. We can pump a slurry down a pipe, a floating pipeline that they install when they go out there and set up the dredge boat. And they can discharge it into a dewatering area, okay? Now, what does that mean? That means if you gotta go under a bridge, you don't have to be opening and closing that bridge to allow a barge to go through. We're gonna show you that on what Lafayette's wanting to do to remove some really bad spots around Rotary Point here in just a second. So this thing is small enough to where you can pass under these bridges without having to, I think you can get under most all of them without having to even open up the bridge. Okay, so we're asking Lafayette Parish to consider utilizing this little rig right here, or a like rig, to do the spot dredge that we're gonna have to be showing you about here in a minute. As an example to the Corps of Engineers, because Corps of Engineers, oh, we can't use a hydraulic dredge, the equipment's too big. That's not necessarily true. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, let's talk about what LCG is planning on doing as a Band-Aid, temporary fix, to clear, snag, and spot dredge the Vermilion River near Rotary Point. Okay. Now, the worst shoaling in the river, in the navigable part of the river, which starts at General Mouton and goes all the way down to the intercoastal waterway in by Vermilion Bay. The worst shoaling in the river is right around Rotary Point. Well, why is that so? Well, there's a concrete coulee that dumps into the river right there, Coulee Mean, and whenever that high velocity flow hits the slower moving Vermilion River, the silt precipitates out there. Okay, so why are they digging it here? Because in 1997, when the Corps of Engineers came in, after the flood of 93, which was not a major flood, I might want to remind people, it was like a 15.7, it was a near major flood, flooded around 500 homes, from what I understand. This is where they dug the river out, and it provided some relief until we got the 2016 event. Okay, but now it's just as bad or worse than it was in 97 when they went in there and did the job the first
It's
time.
worse than it was in 2016. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just getting worse and worse and worse.
So basically, you have some severe shoaling on both north and south of the exit point where Coulee Mean enters the river right there. And if you want to see what I mean, you can go ride down Johnson Street. You're probably still in the morning. I know when I came over here, the water was roaring down Coulee Mean, concrete coulee, going through Munkus Park, headed toward the river. You can see a high velocity stream, similar to what you would see if you were looking at a stream running in the mountains, okay? So it's carrying everything with it. Those coulees are designed to be self-clearing, and they work real good. They are self-clearing. But the unintended
That means
consequence is...
no sediment stays in the coulee, it all lands in the river.
Right. So the unintended consequence is it all ends up in the river.
The consequences,
It
we
all
gotta
ends in the
dredge it or
river,
we're
and-
gonna flood.
You gotta go clean the river out every now and then, where it dumps out.
Right.
It's an easily fixed problem, but it needs to be recognized and it needs to be done
On a regular basis.
on a regular basis, right? Next slide, please. Okay, this is from the submittal for the permit to the Corps from Lafayette Consolidated Government. And what I'm pointing to, those areas I'm pointing to is what Lafayette's proposing to dredge out. Okay, and so there's both north and south of Coulee Mean, right there at Coulee Mean, where it intersects the river near Rotary Point, about a mile. They're going to, what they're saying, what they were planning to do, hopefully we changed their mind, is they were gonna use a bucket dredge, or like a dragline operation, and load a hopper barge, okay? And when they dug these shoals out. Now, this is not restoring the river to navigable
Yeah.
depth. This is a minimal Band-Aid to hold the river until the Corps of Engineers comes in 2024 and does a major dredging project. We're gonna talk about that in a minute. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, the Spall site on the right side is where they're proposing to haul the removal of the Spall from the spot dredge, okay? Which is fine, but the negative about that is that they have to traverse under the Pinhook Bridge with that barge. So I could envision a lot of disruption in traffic by opening and closing that bridge every time they want to bring a barge load of Spall through there. And I don't know what the calculations on the size of the barge and how many loads it would be or how they would manage this, but I could see there being a lot of disruption. So I think a hydraulic dredge would be an answer to this, be a less disruptive method of doing this. Let's go to the next slide. All right, y'all may remember seeing them clean the river, the clearing and snagging of the Vermilion River. That happened during the summer and fall of '21. Okay, all they did was go out there, identify where the trees were, identify where all the cars and such were, and they removed that stuff from the river. And they took a barge load out of the river, and to great benefit, and we'll show you here in just a second. So let's go on. I think it was a very low-cost project. All right, now this is a little technical here, but what you're looking at is two gauges. One of them at E. Broussard, or 733, Louisiana 733, and a new gauge they put at Woodlawn. Woodlawn is a little community, and there's a bridge there between Lafayette and Abbeville, or between 733 and Abbeville.
Yeah, between Milton and Abbeville.
Between Milton and Abbeville, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And we know that the river was significantly lower at Milton during 2016. We didn't have a gauge, but we had feet on the ground observation knowing that that was happening, okay? The river was lower at Milton than it was at 733. All right, we had a little event this year. Now, this is not conclusive. I want to make people understand this event wasn't severe enough to be absolutely conclusive. But it appears that since they removed all this trash out the river, that the water is being conveyed from 733 all the way down to Woodlawn, south of Milton, much better than it was being conveyed before. Okay? So I believe, and time will tell when we have a big event, that this clearing and snagging that we did by removing all the debris from the river has helped tremendously. Now, if you look at the rest of the chart, you'll notice that during non-flooding conditions, when there's not a crest, that there's a differential. So it's a little bit higher upstream than it is downstream. But when you got a big flood coming, they equalize to each other. So let's go next slide. All right, now this is in the Corps 2024 work plan. This is a $50 million work plan. I was told by the parish that they're gonna start digging up at the Lake Martin Road Bridge, which surprised me because that's further north than the head of navigation. Okay, so they're gonna dig from there. They're gonna dig down to, next slide please, Intercoastal Waterway. Okay, so that's a major project. I understand it's $50 million. I understand that Representative Higgins helped us get that money.
And that is a navigation issue, it's not a flood control issue.
Right,
It's to restore the navigation.
right.
But it helps flood control.
Will certainly help flood control.
Yeah.
And you know, for the naysayers that say the river's not a problem, you don't need to drain the river, you don't need to dredge the river, and we heard a lot of that, a lot of negativity along the way. Well, I want to give you an analogy. Suppose Grandma built her house 75 years ago, and there was a ditch in front of it, and we've never cleaned the ditch out. You think there's still a ditch there? Well, the river's just a big ditch, and there's many a tree and debris and trash and whatever that's going into the river, and silt that's going into that river. So we'll go to the next slide, please.
Last one.
Oh, there should be two more.
That's slide 20.
There should be 21, 22.
I'm looking.
Maybe you
Just
didn't copy.
describe 'em.
Or if I can't get back to the live show to y'all pictures. I got 19 and 20.
All right. Well, there was a little hiccup there. But anyway, the next two slides show, if you can get your technical help, Dave, while I go ahead and explain what we were gonna show there.
We're gonna get y'all back on.
Yeah. If you go to Google Earth and you look at the southeastern part of Louisiana, the southeastern part of Louisiana, south of the Mississippi River, is gone. What I mean by gone, is that the only high land left is along the river and along the Bayou Lafourche, period. Other than that, it's either marsh or swamp.
That's eroding away very quickly.
Erosion, subsidence, lots of issues. People are having to move out of that area of the state. We recently went to I visited a shipyard down there where the Corps of Engineers was building.
Lockport.
Was built in Lockport, where they were building a barge, and noticed that right next to the shipyard was a large apartment complex, relatively modern, completely abandoned. Completely abandoned. I counted from satellite photographs and observation on the ground, there was approximately 125 units in there. Those people are totally gone. And I know they didn't move, they probably didn't move to Houma because Houma was severely damaged during the hurricane. And they probably didn't move to New Orleans because New Orleans has got the same kind of issues. So they're coming over here. And the reason they're coming over here, I believe, and that's the reason we're building a lot of our new subdivisions, is because we have the only high ground left in South Louisiana, over on the southwest side of the state.
21 and 22 back.
We got
21.
21, 22 back?
Come on.
Let's go back to 21 real quick. Go to the next slide then.
22.
There
Okay,
we
that's the
go.
one you want.
That's, whoops. Okay, well, you can kind of see the light colored area
You can see it on the
to
colored
to
map.
the south, is swamp and marsh, okay? This is the west side. We have a east side view too. I don't know where that slide's at. It was supposed to be the slide before this. There's the east side. You can kind of see this along the Bayou Lafourche and along the Mississippi River, south of Lake Pontchartrain there, and along the Bayou Teche on the left side of the slide. You got a little high ground, but other than that, everything else is gone. It's gone, it's gone, it's gone. People need to realize that. This is what CPRA Coastal Restoration is working on, trying to keep from losing any more. But they have a daunting task ahead. So with that, I think we're ready to go back to live. And Bob Hammock wants to make some comments.
I'm the potted plant that's been sitting between these two rose bushes here the whole time. My name is Bob Hammock. I live in Bendale Gardens. When my house flooded in August of 2013, and I was pretty much ready to just hang it up. I thought, well, this can't keep doing this. Then I met Harold and got to know him and started listening to what he had to say, and got together with him and Dave and started looking at the problem on a regional comprehensive multi-parish basis, which if anything's regional comprehensive and multi-parish, this is it. These projects, the how many, 15 or so of them that we've been talking about, they deal with the entire watershed. They don't just look out your back door and say, I'm gonna dig a hole out there and maybe all the water will go in there, because it doesn't work that way. It's a regional comprehensive project. We're not politicians. We don't make money off of this. We're the only people that doing work on it that don't. And, we don't get up every morning and think about how we're gonna raise some more money for our next campaign. We get up every morning and work for free to help our neighbors and our friends and our families, because that's what's important. The money's not the big deal. So, and I guess a couple things. Harold's got a saying, and he says, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and being there is worth 1,000 pictures. We don't really, as far as all these studies go, you're always hearing about studies, right? Well, it's been studied to death, okay? And there's been 15 studies, and they're studying their studies now. Well, at some point, somebody's got to do something, and that's where we come in. We're trying to actually make a difference by going out in the real world and doing real world things to keep water in places where it needs to be kept, to make room for it, to go to those places in the natural environment, to either drain it or divert it to the Atchafalaya Basin. That's the basic whole thing of the way the whole concept works. If it's a divert or drain, and but use your natural occurring retention in your swamps and your wetlands, and you get way more benefit, and it's way cheaper. So anyway, and you know, and not to be all negative, I don't want to, but and we've gotten two really good projects done that we got to give credit to the city parish government for. The first one was the clearing and snagging, like Dave said. The indications are that provided a great deal of benefit. Also, the removal of the spoil banks, controversial as it was a very cost-effective and important thing to be able to do. So, like I said, we're not big on studies and models. We're big on doing stuff, because Harold's been, am I pointing at Harold?
Yeah.
Harold's been boating in these swamps and bayous for, I don't know, 70 years, 65
All my
years.
life,
Yeah.
right.
Ever since he was a kid.
Yeah,
And
at
the-
10
the-
years old, I was at Camp Thistleweed.
Yeah, well-
Paddling by Cocodra.
you don't.
We were mainly looking for watermelon patches.
Yeah. But Harold doesn't need to do a model. He knows what's going on out there, and he's telling us. But this is really some wonderful work that Dave has done with the input of Harold, and it's very sophisticated. It's very well done. I've never really heard anybody challenge any of his ideas on this. It's a complicated, multifaceted problem with a lot of moving parts, but we're really fortunate to have a couple of citizens like Dave and Harold here that were willing to take this on and just shoulder this load, which is huge, and put all this energy into it for no cost to us. And if anybody's going to save us, it's going to be them, and it's going to be us. We got to do it ourselves, because the political machine is not. I don't think it's effective enough to do the job. We got to we got to get them to do it because they're the ones that have the money. But they don't. I just think it's a great thing we're doing. I don't want to say that. I don't want to. Like I said, I don't want to be too negative. But the other thing that's important is everybody. Look at your property or look at your flood insurance bills. This is a real thing. I mean, it affects people on. It's a kitchen table issue. When I moved into my house on Beverly Drive, I've been in Lafayette since 2001.
You on the air?
Go ahead.
Can we help you?
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. Mr. Dixon, Mr. Scheffler, Mr. Hammock. And again, it was great to be at Mr. Hammock's home not that long ago discussing this issue.
Thank you.
I understand with both the small project here with the Rotary Point dredging project, and then moving on to 2024, the big project by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I think it would still be helpful, gentlemen, a question from me, to write to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers supporting both of these projects. We as citizens want to make our voices heard, so it would be good to get your input on that, because I think we all need to pull together here and keep the pressure up on USACE to get this stuff done. Thank you, guys.
Hey,
Great
thank
work.
you.
God
And
bless.
when you write, be sure to include a copy to Congressman Higgins, so he's aware
I will.
of your support.
Harold, as you know, this is Jeff. I spoke with Congressman Higgins not too long ago, and he seemed to be very upbeat and optimistic on the project of 2024. So obviously, we remain very hopeful.
Well, that's going to help a lot to restore it to its original design depth. That's an issue of navigation, which we're certainly entitled to. We can
Right.
spend mega millions keeping the Mississippi going. The Atchafalaya River, we spent almost $100 million keeping it deep enough to float the boats. And the Vermilion is one of 11 waterways the Corps is responsible for, which they've totally neglected. It's time for them to come up
Indeed, as we
and
all well know, Harold,
Yes.
as we all well well know.
So with navigation, there's economic opportunity, and of course, it improves the Dickens out of flood control. Jeff, thank you so much for
Indeed.
calling, and thanks for
Yeah.
your support.
Merry Christmas, gentlemen.
Merry Christmas,
sir.
Jeff.
Good work.
Well, I can remind you, Bob, that we did get challenged when we first proposed dredging the river.
I know.
You remember that, okay?
Yeah, but,
But now we got two dredging projects they decided that they're
Okay.
gonna do now, so I think that was
we've made a lot of progress. It's
a
been
huge
hard and slow,
success,
but.
because
but,
it's
yeah,
just
that's
one
right.
dredging the
you
river's not
made.
gonna do any good. Well,
Dave-
bull.
Dave described 12 different, each one of 12 different projects from way up in North Louisiana to Voies Parish. Each one of these will lower water levels in the Lafayette and Acadiana region. So each one is real important. And you put them all together and we have a hell of a victory. So thank you all for being here tonight, Bob and Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell.
Hope we inform the public that things are happening in a positive way. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Second.